Brad, are you just trying to scare us? Shh. Do you guys see that?
Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary?
Our next chapter is inspired by an encounter that Maggie and her family experienced. Maggie, her parents, her older cousin Brad, and two friends, Ethan and Angel, went camping at Henry W. Coe State Park in California. It was her first time camping, so she was incredibly excited, but also a little scared. The thought of being out in the open, protected only by a layer of nylon, that's kind of creepy. But her family assured her that she'd be safe, and they would have a lot of fun. People go camping all the time. What's the worst that could happen? They arrived at the park at night and set up their campsite. While her parents went to sleep, Maggie and her friends were still up, talking in their huge shared tent. At about 3 a.m., Brad decided he wanted a little adventure. Hey, have you heard of the legend of China Hole? Ew, that sounds gross, said Maggie. Don't be immature. China Hole is one of the more challenging hikes in the park. Along the trail is a creek. Legend has it, a married couple were walking the trail when all of a sudden, her husband threw her into the creek. He held her underwater until she stopped struggling. She had been cheating on him, and he wanted to end her life. And now her angry spirit still resides in that creek and pulls down any men who look directly into the water. And the weirdest thing is, corpses will appear in the park, dead from drowning, but nowhere near the creek. You're so full of shit, Angel said. Our campsite isn't that far from the creek. Why don't we go find out? Ethan, being the only other boy in the group, was not too thrilled about the idea of visiting a man-hating ghost, but he didn't want to look like a scaredy cat in front of Brad. Let's do it, he said in his most convincing voice. I'm in, said Angel. All eyes were now on Maggie. Brad was always doing stuff like this. He loved messing with his younger cousin. And Maggie knew that if she said no, she would not hear the end of his teasing. Fine, let's go. Lit cell phones in hand, they quietly crept out of their tent and toward the hiking trail. The only sounds in the air were the light crunching of their sneakers on the dirt and a gentle wind blowing. So when a bush rustled, they all jumped and pointed their cell phones toward the sound. They stared in silence, waiting to see if it would move again. It was probably just a lizard or something, Brad said. Let's keep moving. They continued to slowly make their way toward the supposedly haunted creek. Brad suddenly stopped, causing Ethan, Angel, and Maggie to run into him. What are you doing? Shh. Brad was completely still. Brad, are you just trying to scare us? Shh. Do you guys see that? Brad slowly lifted his cell phone higher and higher until, in the distance, they could make out the faint outline of a woman. They all screamed and bolted back towards the campsite. They hastily zipped up the tent and hid in their sleeping bags. Maggie was trying to rationalize what they had just saw. Maybe it was just a shadow that looked like a woman. Either way, she was glad to be back in the tent. Then, she heard what sounded like footsteps outside of the tent. Slowly, she lowered her sleeping bag. On the tent was the silhouette of a woman. Maggie quickly retreated back into her bag. Eventually, she was able to fall asleep. The next morning, Maggie woke up to an empty tent. She heard voices outside, and so she went out to see what was going on. A few police officers were talking to her friends and parents. One of the officers saw Maggie and called for her to come over. Hi, miss. Can you recall anything strange happening last night? Maggie thought about the woman they saw on the trail and the silhouette outside their tent. No. What's going on? We need you to come down to the station. Maggie and her family were taken down to the police station where they all had to take polygraph tests about what happened the night before. After they all passed, the officer told them what was going on. The body of an elderly woman was found a few yards from their campsite. How did she die? Brad asked. All the kids were wondering the same thing. Multiple stab wounds, the officer said. They all let out a small sigh of relief. The legend of China Hole wasn't real. But then, who was that woman they saw in the darkness? Was it the woman who was murdered? Or her murderer? And whoever killed that woman, why did they spare Maggie and her family? Needless to say, Maggie hasn't been camping since. A special thank you to Maggie for providing the inspiration for this story. Like this video if it gave you the chills, and don't forget to subscribe to Snarled and our sister channels Hissy Fit and Slaytrix. If you or anyone you know have any unique paranormal experiences, send me an email at somethingscary@snarled.com, and I might animate your story. Even if it doesn't fit in with a current theme, it might fit one in the future. And if your story doesn't make it into an episode, tune into my weekly live stream every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I might read it live. If you dare, follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Awkward Sapphire. Until next time, sweet dreams.